Greetings and welcome to another episode of 2-Minute Theology. We always go over 2 minutes. I'm going to try to stay to 2 minutes, but I can't make any promises because today we're going to talk about a huge doctrine, the doctrine of justification. This is an absolutely essential doctrine to the Christian faith. Look at what Martin Luther wrote. This one and firm rock, which we call the doctrine of justification, is the chief article of the whole Christian doctrine, which comprehends the understanding of all godliness. John Calvin, another reformer, called justification the hinge of the Reformation. That's pretty big. If we could boil down the central issue, the central doctrine that was at stake at the Protestant Reformation, it was the doctrine of justification. In fact, I would go so far as to say that the doctrine that still divides Catholics and Protestants today is this idea. So now that I've piqued your interest, what is justification? To answer that question, we need to go back to the very first instance of faith in the entire Bible, Abraham, the man of faith. Look at what is written in Genesis chapter 15, verse 6. It says this about Abraham. And he believed the Lord, and he counted it to him as righteousness. So the Apostle Paul is going to refer back to this little verse on more than one occasion. Why is it so important? Well, a couple reasons. One, justification is by faith alone. Abraham believed the Lord. Galatians chapter 2, verse 16. We know that a person is not justified by works of the law, but through faith in Jesus Christ. Number two, justification is a counting of righteousness to sinners who have no righteousness of their own. God counted Abraham's faith to him as righteousness. Romans chapter 4, verse 8. Blessed is the man against whom the Lord will not count his sin. Because we have sinned, we are guilty before God. We are stained with sin. We cannot wash it clean. We want to justify ourselves and we can't. Here's something to remember. Sinners are incapable of self-justification. We try to self-justify, but we can't before God. We need someone to count us righteous before God because we are not righteous. This is where Jesus comes in. And this is why every Christian should know the word imputation. If you don't know that word, you need to learn it today. The Greek word logizomai means to impute or to pass to one's account or to reckon. Like, for instance, Romans chapter 4, verse 5. After citing Abraham, Paul says this, and to the one who does not work but believes in him who justifies the ungodly, his faith is counted or imputed as righteousness. Therefore, don't miss this, justification is imputed righteousness. We can think of imputation, that term, as a forensic term. And by forensic, I don't mean CSI. I don't mean a crime scene. I mean in the judicial sense, like in a court of law. When we stand before the cosmic judge, God, at Judgment Day, in the divine courtroom, He sees no righteousness in us. All He sees are wretched, guilty sinners who deserve to be punished. But by faith, God counts us righteous even when we're not. How does He do that? Well, the gospel includes a double imputation. On the cross, Jesus was counted guilty when He really wasn't. By faith in Christ, God counts sinners righteous when they're really not. This is why Martin Luther, the reformer, wrestled with Romans chapter 1, verse 17. That phrase, the righteousness of God, struck fear in his soul because he understood that he was unrighteous, and he asked himself, how could a truly perfectly righteous God accept an unrighteous sinner like me? Luther knew his sin well, and he knew the righteousness of God well, but what brought him peace was in studying the Scriptures, he understood that Paul didn't mean righteousness of God in the necessarily as an attribute, but as imputed righteousness. It's a gift. Christ gives us His righteousness. This is why Luther called it a divine exchange. Christ takes our unrighteousness and gives us His righteousness. It's imputed, not imparted righteousness. And what I mean by that is God accepts us not because we're inherently righteous, but because of what Christ has done on our account. We are clothed in the righteousness of Christ. This is why Martin Luther called it alien righteousness. I love that phrase. Why did he call it that? Because it comes from outside of ourselves. It comes from someone other than us. We are, in the Latin phrase, simul histus et peccator, at one and the same time, righteous and a sinner. One of my favorite verses in the entire Bible to describe what happens at justification is Philippians chapter 3, verse 9. Not having a righteousness of my own that comes from the law, but that which comes through faith in Christ, the righteousness from God that depends on faith. It's righteousness from God. It's alien. It's alien righteousness. Today, if you're justified before a holy God, it's not because of anything you ever did. We are incapable of self-justification. It is instead because of what Christ has done. He was without sin. His entire life was blameless before the Father. And it's that righteousness, not our own, that gives us good standing before the judge. Jesus gives us His righteousness. It's imputed righteousness from the Son of God in His obedience, His life, that was pleasing to the Father, given to us. This is the doctrine of justification, and I hope that this gives us a deeper, richer, fuller understanding about the gospel of Jesus and just how much it took Christ to save unrighteous sinners purely by His grace.